Over the past 3 decades, few filmmakers have mastered their craft better than David Fincher. With a fastidious eye for framing and a deep focus on directorial details, Fincher has fashioned some of the most precisely orchestrated cinematic outings since his big screen debut in 1992. Yet for most avid cinephiles and casual movie fans alike, Fincher will almost always be associated with Se7en and Fight Club in the 90s and perhaps The Social Network and Gone Girl in the 2010s. If that's an accurate assessment, then it begs the question, what is David Fincher's all-time most underrated movie? With the recent release of The Killer being a worthy candidate, and a serious case can be made for Zodiac, The Game continues to be a criminally unheralded psychological thriller that, upon repeat viewings, toys and torments the audience with devious plotting and duplicitous tricks as only Fincher can forge. Often considered as the first postmodern mainstream movie on record, The Game has deservingly garnered a lot more love in the past 25 years than when it was released in 1997. With that in mind, there are a ton of fascinating factoids and interesting tidbits behind the scenes of The Game that even hardcore fans of the film may not be privy to, including the movie's origin, the inspiration for the project, major casting and character changes, filming locations, on-set injuries and mishaps, alternate endings, Fincher's ultimate displeasure with the result, and much more. Happy birthday, motherfuckers. Let's leap off the roof and find out what the happened to David Fincher's The Game. Written by John Brancato and Michael Ferris, The Game originated as a spec script purchased by MGM in 1991. When the studio put the project in turnaround that same year, Propaganda Films scooped up the rights, and director Jonathan Mostow was assigned to direct the movie. At the time that Mostow was on board, Kyle MacLachlan and Bridget Fonda were cast in the lead roles of Nicholas Van Orton and Christine, respectively. The film got so far as a planned shooting schedule slated for February 1993. However, in early 1992, The Game was transferred from MGM to Polygram Filmed Entertainment. During the transition, Mostow bowed out as the director and remained on board as an executive producer. Once producer Steve Golan purchased the rights to the film from MGM, he handed the script to David Fincher. Although Fincher enjoyed the plot twist featured in the story, he recruited his writing partner Andrew Kevin Walker, who wrote Seven, to punch up the screenplay. In particular, Walker was tasked with making Van Orton more cynical and mean-spirited. Fincher and Walker slaved over the script for the next 6 weeks, doing everything in their power to tighten up the narrative. Oddly enough, Fincher cited 3 movies as inspiration touchstones for The Game, telling the Washington Times that Van Orton's character was envisioned as, quote, a fashionable, good-looking Scrooge lured into a Mission Impossible situation with a steroid shot in the thigh from The Sting, end quote. Somehow, neither of those movies readily translates to the final result. We'll dive into how Fincher's cinematic inspirations did not have the intended effect on The Game later, but for now, it's worth noting that by 1996, writer Larry Gross was recruited to revise the screenplay with Walker. One of the first changes made included an originally scripted scene in which Van Orton kills Christine before committing suicide in the final act. In Fincher's view, the scene did not make sense and simply needed to be removed. One of the most interesting facts about The Game has to do with the casting of the film. First of all, Fincher initially intended to make The Game before Seven. However, when Brad Pitt became available, Fincher made Seven his top priority and put The Game on the back burner. The critical and commercial success of Seven allowed the producers of The Game to increase their budget, which ultimately ballooned to $70 million. As such, Fincher and the producers approached Michael Douglas to star as Nicholas Van Orton in the movie. At first, Douglas balked, claiming that Polygram wasn't a big enough distributor to release a financially viable film. Once Douglas finally boarded the project, his star status helped launch the movie's production. But here's where things get truly bizarre. At the 1996 Cannes Film Festival, Polygram announced that 2-time Oscar winner Jodie Foster would star opposite Douglas in The Game. At first, Foster was set to play Christine. However, Fincher was not comfortable casting such a bona fide movie movie star like Foster in a supporting role. So as a result, Fincher wanted to change Foster's character to be Van Orton's daughter. This did not sit well with Douglas and his infamous ego, and he insisted that Foster's character be changed from Van Orton's daughter to his sister. Foster found this incredibly odd since she happened to be 19 years younger than Douglas. Moreover, Foster felt she couldn't possibly play Douglas's sister after the two actors appeared together in the 1972 movie Napoleon and Samantha. In that film, Douglas played Foster's legal guardian and served as a father figure. At the time this movie was made, Douglas was 28 years old while Foster was only 9. What most fans of the game don't know is that Foster sued Polygram in court for $54.5 million for the casting snafu, despite her production company Egg Pictures co-producing the movie. Foster was also forced to bow out of the movie due to her scheduling obligations on Robert Zemeckis' Contact. And even so, Foster sued Polygram for an oral breach of contract, in which she claimed the company agreed for her to appear in the game. After the lawsuit was settled out of court, the Conrad character was offered to Jeff Bridges. Once Bridges passed on the part, Sean Penn was ultimately cast as Nicholas Van Orton's brother, Conrad. Meanwhile, the role of Christine was awarded to Deborah Kara Unger. According to Entertainment Weekly, Unger won the role over submitting an audition tape in which she recreated a 2-minute sex scene from David Cronenberg's Crash. After Douglas initially thought the audition was a practical joke, he and Fincher met with Unger in person and were immediately taken by her presence, and she was given the role. While filming the movie, Unger reportedly suffered a fractured foot and was forced to hop inside a filthy dumpster filled with live rats to film one exterior scene. Considering Fincher's infamous number of takes, it's unknown how many times Unger went dumpster diving while filming that movie. Another casting tidbit that often goes unnoticed relates to Nicholas's father. The character is hauntingly depicted in flashbacks plummeting from the roof of Nicholas's childhood home to his suicidal demise. Believe it or not, Charles Martinet, the actor who famously voiced Nintendo's Mario for decades, plays Van Orton's father in the game. Guess he didn't have enough star power to survive that fall. Get it? Mario? Star power? Okay, never mind. Principal photography on the game officially began on August 13th, 1996 and lasted until January 7th, 1997. Although Polygram insisted on filming in Los Angeles because it was more cost-effective, the 5-month, 100-day film shoot took place primarily in San Francisco, California, and the surrounding Bay Area. Fincher originally considered filming in Chicago, Illinois, and Seattle, Washington, but Chicago did not have the kind of Victorian mansions Fincher sought for the project, and Seattle was devoid of a financial district to hint at that kind of old money Wall Street vibe, which San Francisco definitely has. The steep hills of San Francisco were also emphasized visually by Fincher to underscore the class differences among the characters in the film. Most of the game was shot at night and on weekends, with several pickups completed in Los Angeles as well. One of the most striking locations in the movie includes Nicholas's gaudy mansion, which was filmed at Filoli Mansion in Woodside, California, located roughly 25 miles south of San Francisco. To establish the noirish, nocturnal visual tableau of the movie, Fincher hired the late great cinematographer Harris Savides to light and lens the picture, a collaborator he was familiar with from his music video days in the early 90s. Savides was nicknamed Haggis, and whether it's true or not, Fincher once told Empire magazine that a can of haggis can be found in every single scene of the movie as an inside joke relating to his longtime DP. Regardless, Savides sought to achieve a rich and supple texture with the aesthetic of the movie and use The Godfather as an inspirational blueprint to film in stunning locations while retaining a pretentious tone. Meanwhile, Fincher used a chemical printing process known as bleach bypassing to give the Technicolor nighttime sequence a smoother appearance. For Fincher, the challenge was to keep audiences deceived while keeping them engaged through, quote, 45 minutes of red herrings. To keep the audience's undivided attention amid Nicholas's Kafka-esque nightmare, Fincher opted to film scenes as straightforward as possible with one camera rather than confusing viewers with multiple cameras, which runs the risk of boring people with footage. According to Fincher in the DVD audio commentary of the film, my tact on it was I wanted to present in as wide a frame and as unloaded a situation point of view as possible. As much as a kind of simple proscenium way, this is what's going on, this is what the guy sees, and to experience the movie through Michael Douglas. And you have to be cautious of doing too much cinematic engineering. One of the most intense scenes in the film comes when Nicholas's taxi flies off a dock and plunges into the San Francisco Bay. The exterior shot of the taxi submerging underwater was filmed near the famous Embarcadero waterfront in San Francisco. However, the interior of the taxi cab was filmed with Michael Douglas in a water tank on a soundstage at Sony Pictures Studios in Los Angeles. Douglas was fitted into a contraption dressed to resemble the interior of the taxi cab, with 3 cameras rolling simultaneously to capture the underwater footage. Thanks to movie magic and the power of editing, the harrowing sequence feels like one continuous take, despite being filmed piecemeal on location and in a studio backlot. As for the scene in which Nicholas suddenly awakes in a Mexican tomb, the scene was genuinely shot in Mexicali, Baja California in Norte Mexico. Sam Peckinpah fans may notice how Nicholas adorns the same dusty suit worn by Warren Oates in the badass 1974 movie Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. Far from a coincidence, the entire sequence was meant as an affectionate homage to the twisted Peckinpah classic. Speaking of classic twists, the ending of the game has long courted controversy, with many feeling that Conrad's grand charade is a total cop-out at best and an insulting slap in the face at worst. The notion that everything Nicholas endured was one big practical birthday joke orchestrated by his brother left many viewers upset and feeling cheated, with an unsatisfying sense of closure that essentially rendered all of the events before completely meaningless. It's also worth noting that an alternate ending was filmed for the game, which takes place following Conrad's revelation that Nicholas's entire misadventure has been one giant calculated ruse. In the alternate ending, instead of having one awkward final encounter with Christine, Nicholas exits the hotel alone at night and wanders toward the sidewalk. When asked if he'd like a taxi, Nicholas devilishly glints at the camera and says, "No, I don't think so. Thank you," and ambles down the sidewalk by himself. While this feels like a more germane conclusion than the one that featured in the theatrical release, Michael Douglas still feels strongly about the movie in retrospect. When promoting Ant-Man in 2015, Douglas told Collider, quote, "I think what I'm most proud about is that it's one of the very few movies that you could not guess the ending. That's why I'm such a big sports fan. With sports, you can never guess what's gonna happen. Most movies, you get halfway through and you can kind of guess the ending. The game, you could never figure out what the ending was gonna be." David Fincher is a very talented filmmaker. It was an extremely tough shoot. It was very long, a lot of nights. I thought it was a really well-made picture, very unpredictable, and I do hear that picture when I talk about movies that I've made that people liked a lot. Unfortunately, Fincher isn't as proud of the picture as Douglas seems to be, often lamenting his inability to construct a tighter third act and a more gratifying finale. Fincher credits his wife and longtime producing partner Se7en for urging him not to make the game and blames himself for stubbornly ignoring her concerns at the time. According to Fincher via Playboy, Se7en, quote, was extremely vociferous, for instance, when she said, "Don't make the game," and in hindsight, my wife was right. We didn't figure out the third act, and it was my fault because I thought if you could just keep your foot on the throttle, it would be liberating and funny. I know what I like, and one thing I definitely like is not knowing where a movie is going. These days though, it's hard to get audiences to give themselves over. They want to see the whole movie in a 90-second trailer. What Fincher thought would be liberating and funny turned out to be a joke too dark and twisted for many viewers to appreciate at the time. Although the film drew mostly positive reviews from critics and earned $109.4 million worldwide against its $70 million budget, the game was viewed as a minor disappointment compared to the box office success of Fincher's Seven. However, the movie has become a beloved cult classic over the past 25 years and is now regarded as one of Fincher's most underrated features. Ironically, the very first aspects of the film may have alienated audiences in 1997, but have been reappraised as a progenitor of postmodern cinema. Fincher perfectly articulates the postmodern phenomenon and how it applies to the game, telling Independent, quote, "Movies usually make a pact with the audience that says, we're gonna play it straight. What we show you is going to add up. But we don't do that. In that respect, it's about movies and how movies dole out information. Indeed, by putting viewers into Nicholas's shoes and viewing the action through his perspective, the movie implicates the audience as the protagonist, and the entire experience becomes less about the final destination than the winding journey itself. The plot is less about where Nicholas ends up and more about how the movie plots function, manipulate, trick, tease, and misguide moviegoers with images and exposition. This distinction may not have been appreciated widely in '97, but with viewers becoming more sophisticated over the past 25 years, the game remains more important than ever nowadays. Fincher may not feel that way personally, but in terms of how the film has been received retroactively, the game has fittingly become much more lasting and durable than a puzzling cinematic toy. And frankly, that's pretty much what the happened to the game. Even so, the game has become more appreciated over the past 25 years as one of the earliest examples of postmodern cinema and remains among Fincher's most underrated films to date. Take a closer look at it again and remember, discovering the object of the game is the object of the game.